Hey, an exciting game coming up for the Marshall Thundering Herd. Give us the skinny on the herd.
This is a game that Marshall fans circled and highlighted on their calendars from the time it was announced a few years ago. It has everybody excited. The fans have many have made a big weekend of it. Some of my friends took off Wednesday for Chicago, and Huntington is not far from Cincinnati, and several made their way for the trip to Wrigley Field for the Cubs and the Reds on Friday night, and then made a quick turnaround for another bucket list item at Notre Dame Stadium. So everybody's been excited for it.
Well, it's a storied program, but Marshall also has a storied program as well. But have you seen anything in the preparation this week a little bit different than last week, a little bit more of an incentive?
Charles Huff, Marshall's coach, would not be happy at all if his team ran out of the tunnel in this game any differently than it did at home against Norfolk State last week, or it will at Bowling Green next weekend. He does not want ups and downs. He does not want to hear about big games as opposed to anything else, because by definition, the next one's not as big a game. So he has really, since he took over here, made that one of his prime messages. A guy who coached under Nick Saban the last couple of years before he came to Huntington, I think has learned a lot of those kind of lessons. And so he has tried to make sure that the color jersey on the other side doesn't affect the team's tempo. It's excited, a level of excitement, but you're running onto the field at Notre Dame Stadium. You've got all that's surrounding you. You've had everybody in town talking to them. So, yes, it certainly is going to feel a little different. Most of these guys have not played in front of 76, 78,000 people. Now, fortunately for Marshall, I think a few have. The transfer portals changed life for everybody. You're sending out a quarterback in Henry Colombi, who's playing only his second game for the Thundering Herd, but he played the last couple of years at Texas Tech. He has been on the field at LSU and at Texas and earlier in his career at Wisconsin. So at least for the quarterback, this is not going to be something that's totally foreign.
Steve Cotton, longtime voice of the Marshall Thundering Herd, joining us on our game preview. Steve, you've been around the program a long time. What does this new coach bring? What do you see differently about the excitement level bringing into the program this year?
Well, Coach Huff had been known before he came to Marshall as one of the very best recruiters in all of college football, and had helped and his position coach has traditionally been running backs. He was at Penn State. He not only recruited Saquon Barkley, but then he coached him into being one of the top picks in the NFL draft. Same thing at Alabama, Najee Harris. So it's a guy who had recruited and coached Heisman Trophy winners. So that brought a level of excitement in and of itself before he ever set foot on campus, moved into his office. And the Marshall recruiting classes have been good. And then, boom, he shows up and the transfer rules change. How about this, Len? Marshall has 50 newcomers this season. You have your recruiting class and you have some 25 transfer guys. Guys were showing up in the middle of preseason camp. Coach Huff had recruited many of those folks earlier in his life before he got to Marshall. So the fans are excited. The talent level should be higher. And, well, the first test of that after you open with Norfolk State comes this afternoon.
Saturday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. at Notre Dame Stadium. First-time opponent, Marshall, coming to Notre Dame Stadium. And, Steve, a lot of first-time opponents coming into Notre Dame Stadium have given the Irish some fits. You go back and look at Toledo and Ball State over the past couple of years. What could be the keys for a Marshall victory against Notre Dame?
Well, when that question is asked at about every single game around the country today, the answer is turnovers, kind of at the top of the list. And, Marshall fans know that the Herd's an underdog. But if you get a couple of lucky bounces, or I don't know that luck is always the word for it, but you make a couple breaks for yourself, all of a sudden it's more of a game than maybe the folks around the country expect. So you get a couple of breaks that way. But I think one strength for Marshall as this year goes along will be the defensive front. They were good last year. They are even deeper this year. Most of last year's guys are back. They've added transfers from Kentucky, from Purdue, who will and already have been making their presence felt. Flip that around, though. The Herd fans are probably most nervous about Marshall's offensive line. Last year's team graduated 130 career starts on the offensive line. Some of these guys have played in the past, but they are one game in, and it was Norfolk State, and so we still don't know, and people are still, if not anxious about that, interested to see how that plays out.
Many storylines for the game this afternoon, Saturday afternoon against Marshall. And Steve Cotton, have a great broadcast. The last question: who is Kane Madden going to root for on Saturday?
Well, we are hoping that as a Huntington area guy, that he still has some affinity there, but he might be a little bit torn. You know, Jared Parker, tight ends coach for Notre Dame, was an assistant coach here, and his sister works in Marshall's fundraising organization in the athletic department. So we've been teasing her a little bit this week, too.
Steve, have a great broadcast.
Thanks, Len.